Do you think that states are moving about right, a little too fast? What do you think?
I think that many states are moving too fast. And Georgia is a case in point. A 44% increase in the number of cases in really a short period of time demonstrates that perhaps either they were too fast or they didn't put into place the appropriate conditions. The return to normalcy has to be done gradually. It has to be done in an appropriate way. Businesses need guidance. We've got to avoid gatherings of people. Look, this is about people's health. A rebound or a relapse in the number of cases could have a devastating effect on the economy of those states that have moved too fast. So I think the CDC's guidance is probably the best thing, and I think the public ought to hold their public officials to be accountable to that guidance as they reopen. Everyone wants to reopen, but without our health, we have nothing.
But you, as a former mayor and very aware of the political pressures that mayors and governors would face, I assume you don't have a problem per se with the idea that it is the states and localities that are making these decisions. That makes some intuitive sense, right?
It makes sense within what I would think would be a national framework of guidelines. There's got to be some direction because, after all, the CDC is possessive of the most and the best information. So I think to the extent that they create a framework, a set of guidances and recommendations that mayors and governors can follow, it's the best way to do it, because even here in the state of New York, if you will, reopening will be in phases and by regions. So one size does not fit all, even within a particular state.
What is curious to me is that the White House Coronavirus Task Force did put out some guidelines for the phased reopening, but some of the states have gotten ahead of those. They have moved ahead, even though they have not met the guidelines that were put out in those documents. The CDC, another matter. Let's turn.
Todd, that's,
go ahead.
To me, somewhat irresponsible, right? When you're a public official, you've got these broad responsibilities. You've got a fiduciary responsibility and a moral responsibility. And I think those officials that follow the guidance of experts are the ones who will be on solid footing. Look, we're all anxious to get back. And guess what? While many Americans are working from home, there are other Americans that are still going to work every day because they're in essential jobs. And there yet now over 30 million Americans who've lost their jobs.
Yeah, I know you, and I know you well enough to know that when you see the kind of job loss that we had today and have been experiencing, it is just absolutely heartbreaking. And it is even particularly heartbreaking, especially for the constituency that you follow at the National Urban League. That would be minority people. African Americans in particular had made a good bit of progress in terms of employment over the past decade. And to see that wiped away so capriciously.
Ty, in 5 weeks, the black unemployment rate has quadrupled in 5 weeks. The Latino rate is now up to 18%, even higher than the African American rate. And what does that reflect? That reflects that hourly workers, those who work in the service sector, were much more likely to lose their jobs. I think some 70% of all job losses indeed are in the service sector. So this calls for a strong response in the next CARES Act. And look, what could make it worse? What could make it worse is if states and municipal governments, who for the most part have held their employment levels firm, don't have the money to meet payroll, and yet we have millions more who are basically on the unemployment line. That's why I'm a strong supporter. I don't think games should be played. We need to create sustainability funding for states and cities. That's police officers, firefighters, teachers, social workers, sanitation workers, correctional officers, and many, many essential employees that work for state and local government. So let's not play games with that. It is going to be a high price tag, but this is about the future and the sustainability of a nation in the midst of the greatest crisis we've seen since the Great Depression.